So it's a whole new month, and you know what that means. We have a reading wrap-up to do. Hello friends, I'm Rosa, welcome to the channel. So, as per usual, I look forward to doing these videos so much. I think at some point these were my favorite videos to do on a monthly basis. Now it's kind of like, I don't really know which ones to choose from. Is it the TBR? Is it the wrap-up? Is it the unboxings? I don't know, but these are definitely some of my favorite ones to do on a monthly basis. So we have about 9 or 10 books to go through today. Something like that. I will preface this by saying, overall, I read such good books this month. I gave several 5 stars. A lot of like between 4 and 5. Every single one of these books is above 4.2 for me, except from one. But I also went through all the titles on Goodreads just to see what other people thought, and all the books except from the one that I rated below 4 also got insanely good ratings on Goodreads as well. Like, we're talking insanely good ratings. So it's just been a really good reading month for me. I don't feel like I'm overly generous when it comes to 5 stars, but I don't know. I'll try to justify them as well as I can, but judge me all you want. It's fine. So, where should we start? Where should we start? Let's go with this one. The first book that I want to talk about is Defy the Night by Brigid Kemmerer. This was also my book club. I felt like I said that wrong for a second. Book club. Book club. Book club's buddy read pick for last month. I don't know what that was. Let's just move on. Anyway, this is definitely YA. It's romance, fantasy, and there's a surprising amount of politics in this book. Like, royal politics, I will say. It's a Robin Hood retelling as well, and it was so lovely. Like, I had an amazing time reading this book. I actually, because I do spoilery vlogs on the book club's first picks every month, so I did a spoilery vlog on this book. I somehow managed one night to, while not recording, just reading like 130 pages or something. I could not stop. I read until 5 a.m. I think. It was a really stupid decision. Don't do that. So just prioritize sleep. But it was such a good book, I could not stop reading it. So anyway, as for what's going on in this book, we follow Tessa, who lives in a kingdom, I forgot what it's called, it's fine, that is plagued by sickness. People are coughing, and the only way to get better is by using this flower. As you can see on the cover, there's like, it's a flower. This flower is only available in 2 of the different areas of this kingdom though, so it's kind of hard to come by, and the royals and also the richer people are kind of hoarding it to themselves. They're basically taking too much of it, more than what's required for a cure or just for the medicine. So Tessa and a couple of other people work as rebels. So what they do is they kind of steal this flower from them and then dilute it to the fitting formula and hand it out to people that are sick. And that's, as you can probably tell, that's like the Robin Hood aspect to the book. I don't know how else, like what else I can say, to be honest, because I feel like I'm getting into territory that is slightly spoilery. Just know that at some point something happens and Tessa kind of finds herself in the middle of it. There's a lot of politics in there, a lot of secrets as well to unravel, and this is a very gripping tale, I feel, at least. I feel like everyone who read this with my book club kind of had the same feeling about the book as well. Like, some of the things were maybe a little bit foreseeable or predictable, but overall this was a really good read. It was well written, the world is well built, and the characters, especially one of them, has like different sides to them, and it's just interesting to see. So this was a very good read. I think I ended up giving it a 4.5 or 4.4 or something like that. So I just really enjoyed it. I'm so happy that my book club picked this because it was so good. So, Defy the Night by Brigid Kemmerer. I gotta make sure I drink some of my tea before it turns cold. I forget it all the time. It's a struggle. Okay, next up, let's actually talk about the one book that I had a little bit of a hard time with. And I feel like this should not come as a surprise either, because this has definitely gotten not necessarily mixed reviews, but not necessarily good reviews either. And it is Realm Breaker by Victoria Aveyard. This is also young adult, but I feel like it's like a young adult version of high fantasy. So the stakes are higher, there's not a romance subplot. We follow a group of, I don't want to call them misfits because that sounds like Six of Crows, and not outcasts either, but there's a group that comes together because the kingdom is kind of facing a threat that is threatening to tear apart the whole world or the whole realm. It's threatening to break the realm. Yeah, okay. And our lead girl, who is, she's a pirate's daughter. The characters are written on the back. I forgot for a second. It's okay. She's a pirate's daughter. She's the only one who can actually save the realm. So this group comes together to kind of make sure that we can get her to this place so that she can save the realm. And yeah. Here's where I just kind of go off on a tangent, I suppose, so I'm sorry. I apologize ahead of time. But this was really hard to read, not because it's high fantasy, but because it felt so long drawn. I felt like there were way too many points of views in the story. I enjoyed the fact that you actually read from the villain's point of view, but there's like a random point of view in there that I still don't... Why was that put in there? I still don't know. After reading 500 pages, I still don't know. And about the other points of view as well, because we basically follow, who is it? The old sorceress. We don't see anything from her, but the remaining 4 people, we read from their point of view as well. So there's like a total of 6 or 7 points of views in this book, and it's a lot. And I'm left thinking like, why? Why do they swap back and forth between the group members so much? Because they're together basically almost the entire time. So it's like they're on horseback, riding from one place to another, and then in the middle of that trip, they'll suddenly change to another point of view. But it's like nothing else is happening. So like, why? Why would you have to do that? I feel like it kind of contributed to the whole long drawn aspect of the story, and it made it a little bit boring to read. That said, I still want to know where the story goes, because it might have been hard to read because of the point of views and also because it's long drawn, but there's something about the story that I find interesting still, like the whole synopsis of it. I still find that interesting, so I still want to know what happens. So I'm probably still gonna try to read Blade Breaker, but this was just a little bit frustrating at times. I was literally having a hard time just staying awake while reading it at times. There were a couple of good moments in there, but it was definitely not like a common occurrence. Sorry. So I ended up giving this a 3.4 or a 3.2 or something like that, but like I said, I still want to read Blade Breaker because I want to know where the story goes. So yeah, but that's basically what I have to say about this. Just a little bit frustrating at times. Very interesting to see a young adult high fantasy, I feel, especially without a romance subplot, because there's a lot of that in YA fantasy. So it was just like a little bit fantasy but more complicated, and then no romance, as you get what I mean. Okay. Good. Moving on. And then I promised myself when 2022 hit, when January started, I promised myself that this year I would stop postponing all these series that I really want to read, because it's dumb. Like, why are you not reading them? I have still not read, you can't see them, but The Dark Artifices. I've still not read The Last Hours. It took me 5 years to read Ekotar. Like, that's also a bit extreme. I have not finished Throne of Glass, just to like point out how stupid that is. So what I promised myself was that I wasn't gonna postpone all those series that I really wanted to read anymore. So I'm planning on reading Throne of Glass in February, for example. And then in January, I read all 3 books that are out from the From Blood and Ash series that's continuing in March, actually. I am also gonna order A Shadow in the Ember today. So it'll arrive here at some point. I'll read it next month. But as for From Blood and Ash, this is a very, very popular series. It's new adult. They're upside down. Let's just ignore it. Anyway, it's new adult fantasy romance. First of all, fantasy romance, and I feel like that's important to point out. Like, if you're expecting high fantasy vibes from this, do not. This is fantasy romance first, and because of that, this is also what I've rated it as. So, and I'm saying that because I think it's important going into these books that you don't expect high fantasy vibes from them, because that's not what these are. These are fantasy romance. They're steamy, they're smutty, they're filled with banter. The plot is a little bit confusing at times. Jennifer L. Armentrout is also a romance writer first. She does have fantasy aspects to her books, but it's never been about the fantasy plot. It's always about the romance. So that's what I've rated them for, or as. Fantasy romance. And if you're going into these books expecting a good fantasy romance, that's what you're gonna get. Don't expect like a big high fantasy plot, because that's not what this is. But anyway, how do I explain the plot? See, this is an interesting one to summarize, because a lot of the plot is basically split over like split up over all the books. So it's like puzzle pieces are finally coming together by the end of the third book, but you're like, throughout reading the first one, you might be a little bit confused. You're supposed to look at the series as a whole. So it's not supposed to be like one book, then another, then the third. Look at the series as a whole. So if you've only read the first two and you're still confused, it's because there are still answers that we've not gotten yet. But I'm gonna try to summarize at least the first one a little bit without spoiling anything. So in this one, we follow Poppy, who is the chosen. She is the maiden. That's kind of like a title that she's gotten. She's constantly being protected. She's not really allowed to talk to anyone. She's not allowed to basically have any kind of fun. She's not allowed to experience pleasure, for example. She's not allowed to drink. You know, all those things that humans do to have fun with their lives. She's not supposed to do that at all. She's supposed to read boring history books. She's supposed to just walk around with a veil on all the time, and Poppy is not too happy about this. So she might be rebelling a little bit and like secretly sneaking out and stuff. And I'm not sure how much else I can say about her situation, to be honest. The maiden is not a title that I would want personally, let's just put it like that. And I feel like when we go into this, Poppy is already at that point where she's kind of like, this is not, like, this doesn't really feel right. But then she meets Hawk, who is a guard of a sort, and things really start to change for her. And that's all I'm gonna say, because I feel like I can't say anything else, because otherwise I'll have to start explaining the world and the people, and I'm just gonna leave it to you. So, yep. Just know that I gave this 5 stars because for fantasy romance, this is exactly what I want. And it was also well written in my opinion. The chemistry was amazing, the banter was amazing, and the smut was definitely also there, so you know, that's a thing. I also ended up giving this a 5, a Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. But then it did slow down a little bit in The Crown of Gilded Bones, which is the 3rd book. So I felt like in the middle, and I've heard other people say this as well, like it's not just a me thing, but the middle does get a little bit long drawn and it feels a little bit pointless at times and you're just kind of waiting, when does something happen? So I ended up giving this like a 4.5 or 4.4. I'm still so invested in these characters, like, I don't know. It's great. This gives me Echo Tar vibes, and that's what I want from fantasy romance. So I love these, and I can't wait for the War of Two Queens. In fact, I need it right now, because I'm not gonna punch my books, I promise. But I'm a little bit frustrated, okay? So anyway, I'm sorry, that was from Blood and Ash. I love them. Okay. Great. And speaking of redheads named after flowers, me too! My name's Rosa. Anyway, you already know that. Why did I have to remind you? Anyway. I also read It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. And this one, I had kind of high expectations going into. I still liked it, but I'm unable to tell you why. Something happened in the book that I'm just not a fan of in books, and that's why the rating was kind of dragged down a little bit. However, this is adult contemporary romance, but as per usual with Colleen Hoover, it's not a rom-com, so if that's what you're expecting, don't read Colleen Hoover. This is like not dark either, but it definitely has dark aspects to it. We're talking trigger warnings. That's the term I'm gonna use, trigger warnings. Look up trigger warnings for this one because I'm pretty sure that there's a massive one, or like a couple of massive triggers in this book. But that's it, about the plot. We follow Lily, who has moved from a small town, in Maine. I forgot where she was from. A small town in Maine where she grew up with her mom and father. And there's some issues there. She also had a best friend turned cat boyfriend whose name was Atlas, but he kind of disappeared one day. She moved on to Boston to make a life for herself, which is what she's doing when we start the book. And one day she meets Ryle. Is it Ryle or Kyle? Oh, it's Ryle Kincaid. Okay, who is a neurosurgeon, but he's like really against relationships, which is a little bit weird. And there's kind of like a like, what's that about? And they start a thing, you know, basically. But then one day Atlas shows up out of the blue. He's back in her life and it's like, oh, what do I do now? And there's some other stuff to it that I don't really want to talk about. Because I feel like, again, check out the trigger warnings if that is something that's important to you. But I feel like if you don't have triggers like that, maybe just go into this one blind. Unless you really, if there are certain things that you don't like to read about, maybe look into what. I just feel like I don't want to say, like, I don't want to make it obvious what it is. Also because it's not mentioned in the synopsis either, but there's some dark aspects to this. So if that is something that's important to you to know beforehand, or if it's just something that you don't like to read about, definitely look it up, but I'm not gonna tell you what it is. There was like not necessarily a plot twist, but definitely a twist. Maybe that does make it a plot twist. Something happened in the story towards the end of it that I'm personally not a big fan of reading about in stories. It's just not, it's not my thing. That does drag it down a little bit for me because it meant that I just didn't enjoy it as much. But if I disregard that, this was a really, really good book. It was very touching, as per usual with Colleen Hoover. You know, I didn't cry, but that's also because after the plot twist, I just kind of got a little bit annoyed and it kind of ruined it for me. I could definitely, if I didn't feel like that about this plot twist that I keep mentioning, I definitely think this would have hit me in some way, like hit harder than it did. So prepare the tissues, but this was a lovely read. It also has a very, very high rating on Goodreads. I think it's like 4.5 or 4.4 or something. I ended up giving it, I think, a 4.2 or 4.3. So it was just a really, really good book. And just as a reminder, look up on trigger warnings before going into this because I feel like it's a pretty hefty one. So lovely read nonetheless. Moving on. Oh, I also I have to remember talking about that. I don't have a physical copy of it, so I'm like, oh no, am I gonna forget it? But I also read Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, which is, I think it's considered new adult contemporary romance. It has a man-man relationship, so there's LGBT representation in it, and it was a lovely read. I enjoyed it so much that I actually ended up basing a whole video on my other channel about, like, on this book. I did a whole build on this book, or inspired by the book. But in Red, White, and Royal Blue, we follow Alex Montgomery, who is the first son of the US. His mom is the current president. And we also follow his kind of nemesis, Prince Henry of the UK, or of Wales, I suppose it is. Yeah, Prince Henry of Wales. His Royal Highness, Prince Henry of Wales. And the two have met in the past. They did not get along well, but then it's like something happens and I don't just, you know, something happens. I'm not gonna say what it is, but Alex is suddenly like, I'm feeling things and I don't really know what to do about this, but he's looking kind of cute all of a sudden. What's that about? Like, why is he so annoyingly perfect and just cute? Why do I like him? So that's basically what that's about. It's very cute. It's hilarious. This is definitely rom-com. So unlike the Colleen Hoover book, this is definitely rom-com. I feel like it also touches on some important things though, such as prejudice, because, you know, we have the first son of the US, but also a Prince of England, or Wales, UK, whatever. A UK prince. Two very public figures whose families are very affected by prejudiced people if a relationship like that came out. So it just touches on some important things as well. Like, don't think this is just like fun and games all the time. It definitely also touches on that. But it was just such a lovely read. I will say, as someone who doesn't enjoy like fantasy politics, it's fun to read about because it's so different from real life politics. But politics based off of real life politics kind of bore me. I don't want to read about it. So there were times during this book where I got a little bit bored. It was just a little bit too much politics talk at some point. Alex is very into politics. Just so you know, he's like extremely into politics. That's fair. Good on you. But other than that, it was lovely getting to know the characters. I really liked seeing Henry as a character as well, like opening up a little bit, and they were just very charming. It was so funny. If you read it, the PowerPoint literally made me cry laughing. Like, I cried laughing. I was so done. So yeah, I think I ended up giving this, wait, what did I give it? A 4.2, simply because the politics dragged it down a little bit, I think. No, a 4.4. Because of the politics, but also because I think I would have liked just to see a few chapters, like just a few chapters from Henry's point of view. It was all written from Alex, and Alex is a very lovable character, but I don't know. It wouldn't necessarily have to be like massive parts of the book. It wouldn't have to be like 50% of the book, but just like a few chapters here and there from Henry's point of view would have been great. I feel like that would have added just that little bit for me personally. But you know, was a lovely book. Highly recommend it if you're looking for new adult contemporary romance with male representation. It was lovely. And I'm calling it new adult as well because there was just a little bit of steam in there, so just like a little bit, like a tiny bit. So anywho, we got 2 more books to talk about while my upstairs neighbor is quite clearly hoovering. I can hear her dragging the Hoover over the floor. I hope she can't hear me. Just nerding about books. Cheers. It's great. Anywho, while also reading Defy the Night, I read Iron Widow by Xiran Jay Zhao, which is, I want to say, like an older YA fantasy, but sci-fi aspects to it. Romance, there's a polyamorous relationship in there, and it has massive feminism vibes. So after reading this, thinking back on those times I've tried to explain the plot of this, I just want to cringe a little bit because I think I said that there was a program in this book where these pilots are kind of assigned to mechanical birds or something. That's not at all what it is, but also I don't really know how else to explain it without going into the detail. It's definitely you have to have a very vivid imagination to fully follow what's going on. So like it's a lot at times, but it's fun. It's such a good time. So let me just hold on. In this book, we follow our lead girl whose sister was picked to be a part of this. I'm still gonna call it a program because I don't know what else to call it, but it's a military program thing. The part of the world that they live in is kind of threatened by these creatures. So they have this program set up with not mechanical birds, but kind of mechanical animals that are made of spirit armor and stuff. It gets a little confusing. But these animals are piloted by a woman and a man. And there is this sort of like a bond between the 2 pilots when they're in the animals, because they need to use chi to control them, so like energy. They need to use their energy to control these animal suits. And the women are always kind of expected to die from this because if your chi depletes, you're basically dead. So her sister was thrown into this program, ended up being what they call an incubator, which is what the woman is in these animals, and she ended up dying from it. And our lead girl takes it on herself to avenge her sister. So she joins the program as well, ends up killing this pilot that killed her sister, and then in the process also decides to basically screw over the whole program. So that's what this is about. I will say I understand as someone who really enjoyed this book, and I don't necessarily agree with some of the comments that I've read, but I do understand them because there is a question of like, is she a bit of a caricature of a feminist? Like she's quite angry a lot, but I also feel like she has a reason to be. Like she's been stepped on throughout her whole life. Wouldn't you be angry? If you were in her spot, wouldn't you be angry? She's gone through so much. So I understand that point, but I don't agree with it because I feel like she's in her full right to be angry. But she's a very angry character, so just be aware of that. The relationship is super cute though. It was very interesting to see like how they came to these conclusions about the relationship as well, and I just overall really enjoyed it. I think I ended up giving it a 4.4 or something, because I feel like it was badassery at its finest, despite the character being very angry. It was just really enjoyable, touching, empowering, you know, things that I actually really like feeling after reading a book. I will say though, there's a pretty mean cliffhanger, so just be aware of that. Like it's mean, but I don't know when the second book is gonna come out, so that's a bit of a, just be aware of that going into it. Cliffhangers, this is one of those. It's a cliffhanger book, most definitely. If you're wondering what this is, by the way, it's because it's the Illumicrate edition, so it has stenciled edges. Yeah, I ended up giving it a 4.4 because it made me feel a lot of good things. It made me feel empowered, and I felt for the characters as well. It was very gripping too. Like I read this in 2 days while also reading Defy the Night, so like I couldn't put it down. It was just great. Yeah, I don't know what else I can say. Oh yeah, just trigger warnings as well, because that's why I said that it's like older YA, because I definitely feel like it could easily be adult. Like it's very heavy at times, so just trigger warnings, look them up. That's a thing. Yep. Okay. And the last book that I want to talk about, because no, I did not finish Jane Eyre. I'm still working my way through Black Sun. Almost done with it. I got like 70 pages left. It's a fast read, actually, surprisingly so. But the last book that I did finish in January was The Gilded Cage, which is the second book in the Prison Healer trilogy. Yes, trilogy. And this is by Lynette Noni. Can't really say much about this because I would spoil the first one, but I can still summarize the first one. So we basically follow Kiva, who is an inmate at a prison, a very notorious prison, where she also works as a healer. She basically works her butt off. The kingdom is ruled by the royals, and there's also this like looming threat of the rebels. And then one day at the prison, the rebel queen comes in and she's completely unconscious. Like there's something wrong with her. Like they can't figure out what it is, but she's not waking up. And the royals decide that the rebel queen, to earn her freedom, she has to go through the elemental trials. There are 4 of them. No one's ever survived them before, but she has to go through them to earn her freedom. However, she's unconscious and Kiva's like, I need to get out of here too. If I take on these trials, I'll be left out as well. Like I can go left out. I'll be let out as well. She can leave if she somehow manages to go through these trials and survive. So she takes the trials upon herself, and that's all I'm gonna say. So, yep, we have Grumpy Sunshine in there, which is super cute. Also in the second one, still Grumpy Sunshine. But I did have a feeling that, these books are kind of fascinating in a way. The way that they're written, it seems like at times things are just going very slowly and you're kind of wondering, what's all this about? Like, why is it going so slowly? Or at least I feel like this going through these books. And I'm like, this seems a little bit pointless. Like, when do we get to the good stuff? But then all of a sudden, all these little details that are mentioned during the slower part become important, and you're like, why did I not think of that? Like, why did I not take a moment to just go through this when I read it the first time? Like, what? Where did this turn come from? Where did this twist come from? What's going on? It was the same in the first one. I read that during a 24-hour readathon, so like the first half of it, I don't remember that well, but for this book, the first half I was like, this seems very long drawn for some reason. Or just like a little bit repetitive, maybe not necessarily long drawn, but slightly repetitive. But some of the things were important and it just kind of hits you all of a sudden. So if you go into them, pay attention is all I'm gonna say. But what did I end up giving this? 4.2? 4.3. And I know that I'm super obnoxious with my decimals, but I just feel like there's a big step between 4 and 5, so I'm gonna stick with the decimals. Anyway, so yeah, I had a pretty, I should probably say, this is young adult fantasy, romance, and magic. So, but yeah, I had a pretty good reading month. Hopefully February will be a pretty good reading month too. I have so many books I need to read, and it's only a 28-day month, so I'm stressing out a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. But we're gonna do great. It's gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be fine. Yeah. But anyway, let me know if you have read any of the books that I've talked about today. I will include Black Sun in my February wrap-up. I just didn't feel like finishing it before recording, so sorry about that. So if you've been waiting for that one, because I know that it was the book club's second pick, I'll talk about it in February. I promise, or in March, then in the February wrap-up. But if you've read any of these books, let me know. If you've read any other books that you thought were amazing, also let me know. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Expect lots of content in the near future because we are back. No more slowing down. January is always a bit of a slow month, so just to like recharge, and it's super dark outside and it's kind of New Year's and Christmas and everything's over and but we're back now. Although I also am a little bit biased because January is also my birthday month, so like I still love it, but anyway. It's a struggle. It is a struggle, but we're back now. So expect lots of content. Can't wait to record more for you. Expect a book haul coming up sometime soon as well. And that's all I gotta say today. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up. And also if you want to hang out and nerd out, talk about books with me and everyone in the comments, definitely consider hitting the subscribe button. But that is all I got today. So I'm gonna go put my books back on their shelves and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!